Told her I was gonna move to Lancaster.
I guess we're ready this morning. We've already got the golf cart fever. We're all moving to town and riding golf carts around. Tommy loves that, but he don't care. He rides his 150 or whatever suits him. Good morning, everybody. Hope it's a good morning for you. You're all awake, and Sue's got a big smile on her face, so it's a good Sunday morning.
It ain't no good morning. Not really. It's okay, but
We might have to sing that Mandisa song, Good Morning. I used to play it or call my daughter in the morning and turn it up really loud, and she's not a morning person, and she hated it. I am a morning person, so I can jump up and down now, but tonight, later, is a different story. We're on page 20 this morning. The lesson title is The Kingdom Divided. And if I get mixed up, you all will have to straighten me up because I forget the king, Solomon's son and the king of the other guy. I get them mixed up, so you all might have to remind me that that's not right. And I'm going to apologize in advance because I probably am going to do it. Our golden text for this morning says, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. And we're going to see how that played out in this lesson when we do it. We'll see the golden text exactly what it means. And I looked up righteousness because sometimes, you have in your mind exactly what things mean, and sometimes you're right, or me. Sometimes I'm right, and sometimes I've just made up my own meaning. So sometimes I like to look up. It said righteousness is acting in accord with divine or moral law, free from guilt or sin. So that's the meaning of righteousness. And it says righteousness exalteth a nation. So we see why it would exalt it. If you're living according to divine, heavenly, or moral law, then it would seem that your nation's going to do well, that you couldn't help but doing well if you do that.
You can see that our nation is not living in righteousness.
Absolutely. We're living in what they did here in man's law, or what man thinks is best, acting in accordance with man's law is what we're doing. And the more money you have, today in the world, you get to make those laws and those rules and stuff. It's kind of the thought of it. It's not a divine law that has always existed and will always exist. But man can choose, as we'll see here, to live by that law or not live by that law. And there's consequences both ways. And like everybody else, I was going to say if you're like me, but I think everybody, we read the Bible and we'll read this lesson today and we kind of scratch our heads and we're like, what dummies? Look at your offer and look what you took and look what it got for you. What's the matter with you? Why did you do that? But as we see through history of mankind, over and over and over, yes, why can't we learn? Why can't we look at this and see there's obviously the best way and the wrong way, but we've got such a strong will, I guess, to do as we wish that it blinds us and we don't look at that. And like we said, the Bible shows us examples of that over and over. And then as we look in our history past that, we continue to do these things. The lesson background, I'm going to read it, says, after Solomon fell into sin, God raised up adversaries against him. Chapter 11 gives an account of these in the account of the prophet Ahijah's message to Jeroboam. Solomon then sought to kill Jeroboam, and Jeroboam arose and fled into Egypt and stayed until Solomon's death. Chapter 12 begins with Rehoboam's accession to the throne. So, to get it straight, right now, so y'all know I really do know the difference, but I will get tongue-tied. Rehoboam is Solomon's son, and Jeroboam is the man that the Lord sent the prophet to tell that he would be the king of the nations. So if I get tongue-tied and say wrong one, I'm very sorry, because it's easy to do. We'll go ahead and read the scripture. We're reading from 1 Kings, verse 12, verses 12 through 20 and 26 through 29. And it says, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day, as the king had appointed, saying, come to me again the third day. And the king answered the people roughly, and forsook the old man's counsel that they gave him, and spake to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spake by Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat. So when all Israel saw what the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed into their tents. But as for the children of Israel, which dwelt in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all of Israel stoned him with stones that he died. Therefore King Rehoboam made speed to get up with his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. And it came to pass, when all Israel heard that Jeroboam will not come again, that they sent and called him into the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. If this people go up to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam king of Judah. Whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Behold thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And he set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. So we remember last week we talked about King Solomon. We remember 2 weeks ago we talked about the queen going to visit King Solomon and how wonderful his kingdom was, and how he treated his people, the riches he had, everything was wonderful. But then we remember last week, in Solomon's older age, he had married strange women, it called them, from different countries that served all different kinds of idols and gods. And remember, it said that he had set up these temples for these women, and that he had lost his love and honor toward the Lord thy God, and he was joining with these women to do that. And remember, we had talked about that the cost of this was taxed upon his people, that these temples that were being built, they had to be paid for. So, and we see in this lesson, it talks about that the yoke of his father was hard. So the father was causing these people to pay more and more tribute and more labor, because, you know, Solomon wasn't going to build these temples. So Solomon, in his old age, as he fell from his glory, he mistreated the people of his kingdom too. And you know, people that were once Christian that turn away or that aren't, tend to mistreat people or not have the honor and the love for them that they should have. And this is what's happened to Solomon. And we're going to look at his son this week as we do it. I was gonna say there was a little portion that, okay. Starting in 1 Kings verse 12, it says, so Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam the third day as the king had appointed, saying, come unto me the third day. So the people were asking Rehoboam, Solomon's son, you know, how are you going to treat us? How are you going to handle this kingdom? How are you going to rule us? And he asked them for a 3-day span so he could decide what his answer to this was going to be. And if we think of that, to a new king, that's not a bad plan, do you think, than to just make a snap judgment? You know, I always thought when the supervisor comes to a work site or on a job, if they walk in the first day and they start making changes and we're not going to do this like this anymore, we're going to do this and we're going to do this, if they don't take some time to see what's going on, to do the things and to watch, to see if there's good things going on, to see if there's bad, they turn out to be a really bad supervisor from what I've seen. They're all in their head, they think they know it all, and they're not willing to learn or to take any advice or counsel from people that have been there a long time. And so I think this is not a bad decision on Rehoboam's part to take a little time to think about what's going on. It says, let me read to you in what the writer wrote here. It says, now let us imagine the scene. Shechem, a city in the mountains of Ephraim, Rehoboam, the son of a king, going up to be acknowledged and crowned. The people ill at ease, yet not unwilling to be loyal to the new king, if he will show himself gracious to them and lessen their burdens. Jeroboam at the head of the deputation and the following speech made, thy father made our yoke grievous. Therefore make thou, thy father made our yoke grievous. Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father and his heavy yoke which he put upon us lighter, and we will serve thee. And that's when Rehoboam said, and he said to them, depart ye for 3 days and then come again to me. So they aired out their problems. They said, you know, your father has not been a good king in these last times. And we see in other countries, and we've seen in our country lately, the people at that time were kind of ripe for revolt. They were ready because there was going to be a change in the king, and they were at a point of, we don't want this no more. And you know, we're asking you, it was bad, we've had hard times, are you going to do better for us? And this is when, like we say, that he takes some time and he steps back to look at it, which seems to be a wise thing on his part. And it says, and the king answered the people roughly and forsook the old men's counsel that they gave him. So the king has come back. It says in the teacher's part of the lesson, I wanted to go back, it says these two kings present a remarkable contrast. Solomon, at 20 years of age, is the wisest man of his time. Rehoboam, his son, at 40, is unfit to rule himself or his people. Wisdom is not by descent. So as we had said, the Lord gave Solomon wisdom. He had the knowledge of how to rule, how to answer, but his son, who was twice his age at the time, was a very probably spoiled. It said he probably lived in the harems of his father, because you know his father had 700 wives and more concubines and all kinds. So this was a little spoiled man that had the brain of a boy, it seems like, or not even that much, that was taking over the rule of the people. And it says here that we all, that wisdom is not by descent. So the thing of that is, if you have a very wise mother or father, just because you're their child does not mean you're going to gain their wisdom.
He was a 40-year-old living in the basement.
Yeah.
Of his parents.
Yeah, that's exactly today's. And you don't inherit this wisdom. It's not handed down to you. You have to earn the wisdom. And do you all agree? I think we're all at the point
His dad
that,
didn't take him out to mow the yard.
yeah.
Show him how to mow the yard.
You know, I used to tell my daughter, and I have to say she wasn't really bad when she got to be a teenager and when people know everything. But however old she would be, I would tell her, you know, when she was 15, and I would tell her I've been 15 twice now. And so I think I know more than you do. So I've been 15 a lot of times now. But, you know, hopefully, as we all grow older, we gain wisdom. And wisdom, as we know, comes through the Lord. We're not going to necessarily, even in our own rights, we'll get things that we think's right that's not, even as we get older. We can still be old and very unwise.
I always tell mine, I brought you into this world, boys, I can take you
I
back.
take
Didn't abuse.
So we see here that Rehoboam, it says, and the king answered the people roughly and forsook the old men's counsel. It says, and spake to them after the counsel of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, and I will add to your yoke. My father also chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So he has went to the old men for counsel, and he didn't like what they had to say. And that's really kind of a today thing. You're old, you don't know what's going on, I don't want to, they gave him good counsel, but that's not what he wants to hear.
Into his agenda.
Right, it wasn't, you tell me what you want, but I don't. And it says, and spake to them after the counsel of the young men. So the young men told him what he wanted to hear. The young basement parent living kids made up the plan and told him what he wanted to hear, and that's what he went after. So he went back and told this nation of people who were already on the cusp of, we're not taking this mistreatment anymore. He told them, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. But like, you think my dad was bad, let me show you. I'm going to chastise you. He chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. So any of you that, I don't like spiders, but I don't have this fear that of that scorpions, though they're not exactly a spider, but they're meaner than a whip, and you wouldn't want to be around them. So he's saying, do you think you've had it bad? Now I'm going to show you something. So he's really not thinking about the people, or not even wise enough to look out at this, thousands of people that are angry in a mob against you. But he's so full of himself and his power and authority and these little minions back behind him saying, go after him, thinking he's probably promised them bigger basement or something to live in, so he's going to listen to what they have. And the lesson writer says, just by one insolent and swaggering word, King Rehoboam lost forever the 10 tribes of Israel. So he did this to himself. He says pride and self-conceit are the short road to ruin. Here we see the curse of the evil company. So this man has picked, he's had the advice of the elders, he's had the advice of these young whippersnappers who know nothing, and he chose the wrong one, and it's going to cost him. But he had the choice. And we can go back and say Solomon should have done better at being his father and teaching him, and that's probably true if we think about it, because what time would he have had with the son? We saw David had the same problem, that David's son even tried to kill him and gain kingship over it. So, there's a lot to be said about spending time with our kids. I saw something on Facebook, good for a change this week, that was talking about our kids, and that we shouldn't have an agenda that was anything other than theirs, that what was important, that what our kids are into should be what we should be making important to us, that, we've got a short amount of time to spend with them and to raise them, and we need to take it and not worry about the things that we want to rip and run and do whatever and ride four-wheelers or whatever and leave them, that these kids should be the center of our universe while they're young, because there isn't a short time to raise them. And it says in verse 15, it says, "Wherefore the king hearkened not unto the people, for the cause was from the Lord, that he might perform his saying, which the Lord spake by Ahijah the Shilonite unto Jeroboam the son of Nebat." So I want to go back and, because we got to get a little bit of history. If you just read these verses, it's kind of like, what is he talking about? So if we go back here, I want to read to you that this is these verses. And this is, I'm not going to read you the scripture this morning. This is kind of a condensed version of the writer. So Jeroboam, the other leader, not Solomon's son. I told him, Janet, that I get tongue-tied with Jeroboam and Rehoboam that we talked about. Says, one day when Jeroboam was going out of Jerusalem, a prophet called Ahijah met him, and they two walked alone in the field. And Ahijah took a new garment, rent it into 12 pieces, gave Jeroboam 10 of them, and explained to him that he, Jeroboam, would one day be king over Israel. Solomon heard about this, and it made him furious. He sought to kill Jeroboam, and so he who was one day to be a king fled into Egypt. So Jeroboam, because he knew Solomon knew what the prophet said and was trying to kill him, fled into Egypt. And does that remind us, we talked about David. Remember when David was anointed king and Solomon found out, and for a lot of other reasons, Solomon chased David trying to kill him. So Jeroboam has done the same thing. It says Jeroboam was in Egypt when Solomon died, but he was in Shechem when the tribes assembled there. It would appear that as soon as he heard the death of Solomon, he returned to Egypt. And it says, I'll go ahead and read this. It's a really good. It says, "Now let us imagine the scene. Shechem, a city in the mountains of Ephraim, Rehoboam, the son of a king, going up to be acknowledged and crowned. The people ill at ease, yet not unwilling to be loyal to the new king, if he will but show himself gracious to them and lessen their burdens. Jeroboam at the head of the deputation, and the following speech made, Thy father made our yoke grievous, now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father and his yoke, which he put upon us lighter, and we will serve thee." So we see that Jeroboam was told by a prophet that he would one day lead the 10 tribes of Israel. So this is coming to pass now, that this is happening. And as it mentions here, the people were not unwilling to serve the king's son. They just wanted to know that he was going to have some heart for them, that he was going to be a good leader to them, and that they would follow him if he did. But we see he took the counsel of these young men, and so the people were ready at that point. Jeroboam had already been given this instruction by the Lord that he was going to take these tribes. So in the midst of all this, what the prophet had foretold was working out in what was happening. Is where we are. So we're going to be in chapter 12, we'll start in verse 16 now. We're going to skip a couple verses a couple times here. So when all Israel saw that the king hearkened not unto them, the people answered the king, saying, what portion have we in David? Neither have we inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Now see to thine own house, David. So Israel departed unto their tents. I'll read what the lesson writer put here. It says, these words mean, since we have no kindness or fairness from David's seed, what is his house to us? Why render homage to his son? We receive not from him. Why yield aught to him? The work of 2 generations was undone in a moment. So the people have come before him and they're saying, you're going to treat us mean, you're going to do these things to us. Why would we continue to make you our king, to work for you, to give you our money, to give you our taxes? And like it says, by this stupid decision that he's made, the kingdom's being split by it. So, you know, the hard work, you see, I don't know why I always remember this, but when we were young and we first started riding, there was an older couple that rode horses that they were probably in their mid-70s at the time. And of course, we were poor and we had an old truck and a trailer, you know, we were just tickled to get down there and ride. And they had this really brand new diesel truck that I wanted a diesel truck so bad I could taste it, and we couldn't even think about one. And this big new horse trailer with living quarters and stuff in it. And the man told us that his son told him, when you die, I am going to blow all your money. So he went, and that's what they said. It's like, well, if you're going to blow what we work for hard, we're going to have something to go in style. So they went and bought them $100,000 worth of truck and trailer at that time for it. But, you know, and that's pretty much what David has done and what Solomon has done. This little basement living brat, I like that, Neil, that was good. He's undone it. He has taken 3 days of his answer, and he's undone the kingdom at that point that he's done. And these people are saying, you know, what are we going to get? Why would we serve and continue this? In verse 17 it says, but as for the children of Israel which dwelt, sorry I'm tongue-tied this morning, in the cities of Judah, Rehoboam reigned over them. So when the kingdom split, the people that were living in Judah that were actually had kind of migrated from the other areas, that they stayed there and stayed under Rehoboam. They didn't relocate their life and move. They stayed with him. In verse 18 it says, then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and all Israel stoned him with stones, and then he died. Therefore King Rehoboam made speed to get him up to his chariot to flee to Jerusalem. So at that point, Rehoboam, the king's son, still didn't either believe it, think he had lost his power, because, you know, I would say he's kind of living on Solomon's shirt tail and the power that his father had, and how dare they speak to me like that or act like that. So it says he sent Adoram, who was over the tribute, and I'm assuming the tribute was maybe taxes or what the people had to pay, it says. And all Israel stoned him with stones, and then he died. So Rehoboam kind of saw at that point really what they thought of him. He sent his man out to get order and to, you're not going to do this, and how dare you all do this, and they killed the man for doing it. And then we see the rough and ready, brave Rehoboam made speed to get up to his chariot to flee Jerusalem. So he, at that point, he knew where his place was. I guess he figured, if I don't get out of here, they didn't have a problem with killing this man, and I'm next. And his all his bravery kind of lost it, left him. Yeah, he had to get out of Dodge, as they say, really quick. it says, the lesson writer says, mounting his chariot in haste and with alarm for his safety, the king who had come to Shechem to obtain a crown returned to Jerusalem, having lost a kingdom. So he went with big pomp and circumstances, expecting something big, but he ran back home with his tail between his legs. In verse 19 it says, so Israel rebelled against the house of David unto this day. I want to read to you what the list right. It says, to the tribe of Judah, the family of David belonged. There was less inclination on this ground to begin with among them to go the length of revolting. Though they too were pressed with burden and taxation, yet royal expenditure, residence, magnificence were all near them and were of some benefit, doubtless. So the tribe of Judah that he remained in control of was directly where David came from. So that area had some loyalty, and they were close to all the splendor of the kingdom and stuff. So they weren't quite as angry. So they were willing to stay with Rehoboam and stay part of that kingdom. In verse 20 says, it came to pass when all of Israel heard that Jeroboam was come again, that they sent and called him into the congregation and made him king over all Israel. There was none that followed the house of David, but the tribe of Judah only. So we see that the 12 tribes of Israel at this point were broken apart, and that Jeroboam, that they gave him the coronation as king over the 10 tribes. So, Rehoboam had successfully split the kingdom. The major part of the kingdom was under another king at this time. So we're going to skip down to verse 26, and we're going to talk about Jeroboam, who has just received a great honor at this point. He has been given the kingdom. He's been given just imagine the opportunity that he's given right now. He's been given the majority of the kingdom of God's people. He's head of it. In verse 26 it says, and Jeroboam said in his heart, now shall the kingdom return to the house of David. So he's a human, and we're all human. So, you can't just judge because we all have similar feelings. So Jeroboam, who has this large portion of the kingdom, he's kind of thinking in his head, these people are going to return, and they're going to become a nation again. They're going to go back into Jerusalem, the fabulous capital city, and they're going to kind of lose these feelings of revolt that they've had, and they're going to become one nation again. And I want to read to you a little bit here in the lesson writer, kind of what's going on also in the scenes during this. It says, Rehoboam, remember Solomon's son, fled from Shechem to Jerusalem and immediately summoned 180,000 warriors from Judah and Benjamin, intending at once to make war on the rebels. So the king's son who he ran back to base, and now he's trying to gather up warriors to go fight and get this kingdom back. He wasn't very big by himself, but now he's gone back, and I'm sure he's got with these council of youngins that he had, and now he's feeling big again, and he's going to go fight them. And then it says, then arose a notable prophet, Shemaiah, who solemnly in the name of Jehovah forbade the civil war which Rehoboam was on the point of starting. Rehoboam submitted to the prophet, but proceeded to strengthen his kingdom against possible attack. So the boys got a little bit smarter. He listened to this prophet that the Lord sent to him and told him, you don't take these men out and fight against this other kingdom. And he listened, in which there's a little bit of good to that. And Jeroboam, the one that had been made over the king tribes, it said Jeroboam clearly foresaw that if the people went to Jerusalem as in the time of past 3 times a year to keep the feast, the religious sentiment would in time reassert itself and sweep him and his new dynasty away. So now the new king is having these thoughts of, the people, they're all behind me now, but as they go to Jerusalem and go to the feast and go to the temple and serve, that they're going to eventually go back and that the nation is going to be one and whole again, which is a good thing. But he has already started getting kind of full of himself, and he's the leader now, and he doesn't want to give that up. He's the king, and he's had this opportunity, and because of his own self-conceit, he doesn't want to give that up. In verse 27 it says, if this people go to do sacrifice in the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, then shall the heart of this people turn again unto their Lord, even unto Rehoboam king of Judah, and they shall kill me and go again to Rehoboam. So old jealousy, I guess, and insecurity is really eating at him, that he doesn't want these things to happen. And it says, then shall the heart of his people turn again to their Lord. And that's what the heart of the people need to turn to the Lord. The heart of our nation needs to turn. But this man wants this power above and beyond that. Even though he has been given the power by the Lord, he was specifically, chosen for this and told by a prophet of the Lord. Verse 28, it says, whereupon the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold and said unto them, it is too much for you to go to Jerusalem. Behold, thy gods, O Israel, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. So to keep them from going back to their country, he's gonna pacify them. He's gonna say, it's a long, hard journey. They're under a different king. I'm going to make you gods that you're going to be able to come, and you're going to be able to serve these gods, and you're going to be in your country, and you can serve that. He doesn't mention the Lord. He says, O Israel, which brought, and made calves of gold. And he said, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. You all remember the calves of gold bring them up out of the land of Egypt. They got pretty severely punished over the calf that they made on the way out of Egypt. But, this king, because of his own thoughts and how high he wanted himself, and it says, and he set one in Bethel and the other put he in Dan. The lesson writer here says, when unbelief has shut God out of the heart, his commandments are lightly esteemed. So we see that it was pretty easy for him to pass this over to the people, and they agreed, and they were happy that he had done these things. So this man, who could have surpassed possibly David and Solomon in being king over this country and what he could have done for the country, because of his own conceit and wanting to be the authority, he's thrown it all away. He just, immediately changed to serve idols. Anybody have anything to add or to? We won't do all these questions. And I guess the question I always like to ask, how this relates to us today. And part of this, we'll answer this. It says, what mistakes did Rehoboam make? So this is Solomon's son. What did he do wrong?
And you can say that he fell away from God. wasn't following God, and pretty much followed in the steps of his dad. And I guess you can say he seen how his dad was ruling, so he just carried on the same.
He had no intent to turn it, he was either gonna be tough or his dad.
Chose himself instead of Christ.
Yeah. It says, what lessons may we learn from Rehoboam's mistakes? And remember, he took counsel from the elders, and he took counsel from the youngers, and he chose the wrong counsel.
I think you need to pray and seek God.
Not your own will.
He didn't choose the best.
Yeah.
So God had to use the second best.
Okay.
He was trying to go with his agenda, not God's agenda. Pretty much.
Janet had brought something, I thought this was good in the introduction. It says the best was doubtless a united kingdom according to the original plan, provided the people were worthy of the best and willing to be united in heart as well as in form. And it says the second best, it says he does what is best for them as they are and what will most tend to make them what they ought to be. So by their choices, they had made the wrong choices, like you all have said. So the best things that God had set in store for them, they gave up because they had gone down the wrong path. So he had to take the second best, like Janet said, which wasn't the best thing, but it was the best thing to lead them. Our kids, we would do the same thing if they were on the right path. Say, for example, if we had $100,000 that we were going to be able to gift our child, it's like, here's a gift to you. And if that child was doing well, was, working hard, had a family, doing right, we could say, here's your gift, put this on the house, you won't be in debt all your life, I'm giving you this. Versus if your child had a severe drug problem, you wouldn't want to say, here's you a gift of $100,000. Yeah, that $100,000 would not be a gift to that child. It would probably kill them if you do it. And that's what this nation, because of their choices that Janet had said, that they weren't in line for the best that could be given to them, that they had made choices. So it says, what opportunity did Jeroboam have? He was the one that the Lord had given, that had set out the 10 kingdoms and said, you're going to be the king of these 10 kingdoms.
Help to turn the heart of the people back to God.
Yeah, he had an opportunity to make it great and maybe even to lead where he was afraid that his 2 tribes or 10 tribes would melt into the 2. Had he been upstanding, the 2 tribes may have joined his, but he was so in his own head and in his own power that he couldn't see that what can we learn from the mistakes? To serve the Lord first and foremost.
Don't shut God out.
See what the Lord's doing. Watch who we take counsel from. Make sure that we're not listening to what we want to hear. Because some things aren't going to be what we want to hear.
But last thing, be not deceived. God does not lie. So don't let people deceive you into doing the wrong thing. Stay true to God.
Because of things that maybe look right to us on it. Thank you all.